Hey, are you swamped by candidates texting and emailing you, begging for money? Let's talk about what's going on there. I'm Sarah Tabor. I have run for office before, and I am back in the civilian world just talking about politics, sharing with you some of my experience in it. I'll be using my local congressional race as an example. Hopefully it can help you navigate some of what's going on. Hey everyone, I'm doing a live stream soon. The time and date info will be here, and info on how to join will be down below. Let's talk about why Trump's second term is going a lot different than his first term. We've got jackbooted thugs in the streets, people losing their jobs, and being threatened for saying things that are politically incorrect. So why is that happening now? The answer is Congress. Back during Trump's first term, he had to deal with Republicans who didn't like him, who didn't have power because of him. They are all gone now. Every single person in the GOP works for Trump at this point. That means Congress is not doing its job to be a check and balance on the president. How do we fix that? We gotta win back Congress. Democracy is a mosaic. Winning back Congress is not the only thing we need to fill out the full picture, but it is a key part. If we don't win back Congress, everything else we do to try and preserve democracy is a stopgap. It's like that little Dutch boy with his finger in the dam. It works for the moment, but to really fix this, we have to get the full repair team in. And that is a Congress made of people who are independent from Trump, who will actually serve as a check and a balance on his power. So let's talk about how to do that. Around the world, because of inflation, people are upset. And they express that by voting out whoever is in power. In 2024, that worked in Trump's favor. In 2026, it is going to work against him. So that is going to be very different, and it's good to be ready to work with that. Another thing that's different this time, 2026 is a midterm. There's no presidential race. Trump being on the ballot really drives GOP turnout. When he's not running for president, a lot of people who are Trump voters just don't turn out. With those two things combined, 2026 is set to be a difficult year for Trump and his allies. So between Trump driving our economy into shambles, a quarter of his voters regretting voting for him, and a bunch of them who are going to stay home, it is a really important year for folks who oppose Trump to get out there, to get his people out of Congress. In politics, like with most things, you gotta strike when the iron is hot, and it does not get much hotter than how it's going to be in 2026. I know it's only September of the year before, which seems really, really early. In the US, most Americans don't even really tune into the election until a month or two before it happens. But early preparation is key. It makes a huge difference in how the race goes a year later. And as someone who's been down that road, I want to walk you through how early preparation and how even a little bit of effort and care into a race ahead of time has huge consequences for later. If you're a grassroots kind of person, getting involved in races early is the time when you can have the most impact. When it comes to flipping districts held by Republicans, there's kind of a spectrum, right? On one extreme end, we have races that are going to be very razor thin margins. And on the other hand, we have districts that are 70, 80+% Republican. It's just never going to happen. And something that I notice is the races that get the most attention and the most money are the ones on the extremes, right? It's the ones where, it's so close and you can just barely push it over. And it's also like the impossible long shots. This is never going to work, but some people really like the romance of that. And these are the ones that get all the money and the attention, right? I like to focus on ones that are kind of like here, right? People who are focusing on the really close ones are going to miss it. And people who are focusing on the really long shot, romantic, long haul ones are going to miss it. But they're winnable. And they're only winnable if we get in there early and if we are really smart with how we put our time and effort into these races. These are the ones I focus on. Where focused time, attention, and yes, money makes a huge difference for seats that the GOP probably thought were safe. And I just happen to live in one of those districts right now. It's the North Carolina 7th Congressional District. We have someone fantastic running for this seat, and I really want her to win. So I want to walk you through how a little bit of grassroots organizing can make a huge difference for a district like this. And I'm going to use my district and my local candidate as an example. Now, traditionally, the three ways to get involved in an election where you want to see somebody win are the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasure. Before we get too far into this, we should talk about money, because I know we're all getting swamped by candidates begging for money right now. I was one of those candidates begging for money once upon a time. So let's talk about what is going on with the money. What do they do with it all? It comes down to TV. In a lot of elections, whoever wins comes down to who could buy the most ads on TV. That's what the deal is with money. I don't love it either, but it's how elections work. I ran against a commissioner of agriculture who, every single one of the 20 years he's been in office, our state has led the country in farmland loss. He's objectively bad at the job, but he was really good friends with agribusiness, so he had bottomless money in the bank. Game over. I could complain about that all day, but it's not going to change the fact that most people learn about what's happening around them from TV. If we want to do any kind of deeper change about that, it would require winning a lot of races, passing some laws about campaign finance. You have to win elections to do that. We have changed how we manage elections a lot in this country. And that change was always done by people who won in the previous system. So just because we have to play an unfair game now doesn't mean we're stuck that way forever. But it does mean we have to play like it's for keeps. Those are some thoughts on money and politics from someone who ran at a very steep disadvantage because of money in politics. Fundraising deadlines. So many of those panicked texts and emails from candidates are like, fundraising deadline this, fundraising deadline that. What is up with that? Okay, so I came from a grassroots background where I started with like grassroots, very small dollar donations, and also Patreon. They're surprisingly similar. It's a little bit eerie. And I had to learn how to talk to bigger donors from scratch, moving like upward from grassroots level. A lot of people who work in politics come the opposite track, right? They're used to raising money from big donors, and then they had to learn how to talk to grassroots donors, right? So all this pressure about fundraising deadlines is very much a holdover from working with big money donors. These are people who can donate $1,000 or more at a time. So a thing that will happen in conversations with donors is they'll express interest, they'll say, oh yeah, I love what you're doing, I'd love to donate, and then they just kind of like never get around to it. It's not because they don't want to, it's because, maybe they forgot. We're busy. I mean, we've all had some online fundraiser that we open the tab and we mean to donate at some point, but we just kind of forget until maybe you get an email or a text that says, hey, the deadline is tomorrow. And you're like, oh, I got to do that. Big money donors are the exact same way. That is why fundraising deadlines are a big deal. And we'll get into why that's an important metric on a campaign's success in a moment. It shouldn't be, but it is. So if you've spent any time around politics, elections, you might have heard the phrase, Emily, early money is like yeast, it helps raise the dough. What does that mean? Success in an election, in so many cases, comes down to who can buy the most TV ad time, which means success comes down to who can raise the most money. So if you are considering putting some money to some races, by the time someone's been running for office for 2 or 3 or 4 months, if they're not putting up some kind of numbers, if you give them money, you're just spitting into the wind. You might be the only person doing that. So unless you're like a bajillionaire who can single-handedly bankroll a candidate, it is not worth giving them money, right? That is why people look at that. That's why those fundraising numbers are considered so important, because they tell you if that candidate actually has the ability to raise the money to do the job. Because again, unfortunately, our political system relies on who can raise enough money to be on TV all the time. So that, on the one hand, is annoying. But on the other hand, it does mean that early money is very powerful. The people who are waiting until a little bit later to see which candidates are serious, well, the earliest donors are the people who show you which candidates are serious, right? So this is a place where if you are a grassroots kind of person, you can have a lot more power than you would think. We're so used to hearing about how these races can cost millions of dollars. Well, $100 a year out is worth a lot more than $10,000 the month before an election. Because the bigger donors who get involved later, they're waiting for early donors to show them which people are serious. So if you're a grassroots donor that doesn't have a lot of money, you can have a really outsized impact if you get involved very, very early. Every quarter, candidates have to file and report, this is how much I've raised. And that is what donors look at to see who's actually serious, who's actually raising enough money to get the job done. So that is why fundraising deadlines are so important. If you're a candidate, you want to have as much money in hand as you possibly can before the fundraising deadline. As a rank and file member of the public, I hate getting all these panicked texts and emails about fundraising deadlines. As a candidate, they were crucial, because if we could not use the deadline, a lot of donors would just kind of like never get around to donating, and then you're dead in the water. That's why we're always hearing about fundraising deadlines. That's what's going on there. Obligatory plug. The candidate for NCO7 is Kimberly Hardy. There's going to be a place on her website where you can sign up to volunteer. That's things like phone banking, stuffing envelopes if you live in the area. If you're into that kind of volunteering, go to her website and check it out. And of course, since we've been talking about money, yeah, early cash is really important, and we're at an early enough point in the race that a little bit of money actually makes a huge difference now. So if winning back Congress is something that you really, really care about, this is a crucial race. It is winnable, but only if we hit hard really early on. Please help me get a better congressperson. Thank you. Oh, also, online buzz, just talking about it is hugely helpful too. If that's the kind of volunteering or work you'd be interested in doing, like that's just super helpful, honestly. So that live stream coming up will be with Kim Hardy. We're going to talk about what is going on in this district, what needs to change, and how she's going to do that. I hope you can join us, and if not, that's okay. We're going to record and post it later. All right, last but not least, this is exactly the kind of content you cannot make with nonprofit money because it's endorsing a candidate. So I'd like to thank today's sponsor for this video, me. My YouTube channel's grown some, so now I have a little bit of ad revenue that I can use to do things like this just because I want to. I really want a better congressperson, and I hope I was able to give you a little bit of behind the scenes how elections work that can be useful for you in whatever district and with whatever races you might be working with.